Greetings! Welcome back to the Old Ways Rising Farm YouTube channel, where today we're making some spoons. Now, these are spoons where the hollow work has been done with burning. We're taking coals and we're using fire to burn out these hollows. This is a spoon that I made a week ago and is in the drying process. This is the one that we do in the current video. And both of these are made out of foraged green wood, where we went out into the woods and we collected some material. And in the beginning of this video, I'm going to take you on the collecting trip where we get this one. We're going to talk about what you're looking for and the ethics of collecting. But I do want to say quickly here in the beginning, if you don't have access to a forest, if you don't have a neighbor that you can ask permission to go and look for some craft items, you can do this from a board. This is a small spoon that my wonderful wife made last week as well. It's the same time that I was working on this one. It's a lot of fun. It takes very little material. You need some common tools, like you need a saw to cut, if you're going to cut a branch out, you need a saw. You need to be able to split and shape and do some whittling work on the handle. But the hollow work is all going to be done with fire, so you don't need extra tools for that. So if you're interested in this project, come along, let's collect some wood and make some spoons. So if you're going to go out and collect wood for making spoons, especially if you want like a classic ladle shape, you're going to be looking for branches. Now, this is a branch that I found here. The beavers cut this down, but I want to show you, right here is the type of angle that you're looking for, where you have a branch coming in at, kind of an acute angle to the trunk, and your spoon would be, this is the handle, grip there, and then you would split the trunk in half, and here is the bowl, okay? Now, this piece is not thick enough. The whole thing is not thick enough. The handle is not thick enough to really be a sturdy handle, and until I split this down, there's not going to be enough left for a good ladle scoop, okay? So what you really want is a branch which is about as thick as your wrist, but round, at least, for the handle. And you want the bowl part to be pretty much as thick as your wrist, but also that tall. The reason for this is when you're working with green wood, you're really going to be thinking about splitting it in thirds, okay? One side can be one piece, one side can be the other piece, and then the middle third with the pith in it, that's waste. And you really do need to split out about a full third of the branch as waste to get away from that pith where it's going to want to check into. That's just the nature of doing this sort of round work. So, your branch needs to be 3 times in diameter the depth of the spoon that you want to carve. So this piece won't work, it's too small. But I wanted to come and talk about this for a minute, because wood that's already down is a very ethical way to collect for this. And around beaver lodges, around beaver ponds, are one of my favorite places to go and hunt for project wood like this. I recently did a demonstration, a burnout spoon demonstration at a powwow, and the majority of the wood that I brought was wood that was already on the ground recently, within this year, cut down by beavers. Also, the beavers are very helpful for collecting because you get these angles, these nice acute angles, way up in the top of the canopy. So it kind of needs to be brought down so that you can get to it. Another really good place to look for this sort of craft project wood is recently felled logging cuts. So if you have a friend or a neighbor that's recently sold timber, ask them if you can go onto their property and collect, okay? The third way that I will collect green wood for projects, and it's my least favorite of the third, but can still be done responsibly if you know how to make a good pruning cut. So when you are looking at a branch on a living tree, if you can make a good pruning cut, and pruning that branch won't harm the tree, then that can be ethical to collect, assuming you're on your own property or property where you have clear permission, of course, right? In order to do that ethically, you do need a good knowledge of pruning, what branches are good to prune, and how to make a pruning cut so it won't introduce rot into the tree, okay? And if you get good at that, and you get good at looking at these trees and saying, well, okay, that branch is in the shade, it's going to be aborted soon anyway, and you can make a good pruning cut, you're actually doing the tree a favor. So that is an ethical way to collect. The fourth and least favorite is cutting a whole tree. And that's really only ethical if, again, you know forest dynamics, you know how forest regeneration works, and you know that this tree is going to die anyway. Okay? So if you have a mature, if you have a mature climax stand with a fully shaded understory, and you have this one little straggler on the ground that's suppressed and barely any leaves on it, and it's got a nice piece in it, you can cut that whole tree because it's going to die within 3 or 4 years anyway. Okay? But don't do that unless, you know it's going to be cut, it has been cut, or it's going to die, and it, cannot survive. And trees that have been suppressed for long periods of time, even if you do a full canopy removal and expose that little tree to sunlight, there's a point of no return. There's a point at which it has grown suppressed for so long, it's going to sunburn and die from exposure. If it's released, it's never going to become a large tree. So if you see those and there's good wood in them, that can be an ethical way to collect as well. The thing that's never an ethical way to collect, that will say don't ever do, is if you find a burl growing like on the side of a tree. Okay? Because if you find a burl in a branch that can be pruned, or you find a burl in a log job on a tree that's already cut down, take it. Absolutely take it. But if you have a large mature tree that you don't intend to cut, it's got a big burl on the side, and you take a chainsaw and cut that burl off, that's a wound that the tree will never be able to compartmentalize. It will introduce heart rot, and you have killed the tree. Okay? So when it comes to removing burls, unless it's up on a branch, either cut everything or nothing. Don't do it in between. Okay? So if it's ethical in that situation to cut the whole branch or the whole tree, then also take the burl, yes. But if it's in that situation not ethical to kill the whole tree or that whole branch is growing on, don't take the burl. Just enjoy it as part of the beauty of the woodland. Okay? So let's keep looking and see what we can find. Here's one that we are going to harvest. Now this is a cherry tree that was brought down by the beavers. I can look back and see the chew on the stump. So again, it's already down, it's already on the ground, but it's recently felled, so it's still sound wood. Down wood is good, rotten wood isn't. Okay? But this is good wood. Now here we have a straight section right there. We have a curve here, we have a curve here, and then another straight section. So what I'm going to do is cut it off here, okay, and then cut it off out here, and when we get back up to work on it, I'll cut this middle section in half, so it'll be handle and a bowl here, handle and a bowl here. I might be able to get 4 blanks out of this if I split it and play my cards right. We'll see, I'm not sure, but we'll at least get 1 or 2 good ones. So this is already on the ground. This is good ethical wood to collect. I'm going to collect it, and I'm just going to have to chew my way through this thicket. So it's going to take me a minute. I'm not going to film the whole process, but you can imagine me, complaining a little bit about the thorns as I pull a piece of wood out. I have faith in your ability to imagine that. Now, right up there is a burl. This is a cherry tree, and usually these occur when bacteria or fungi have gotten into the tree and cause an anomalous growth. They're really, really good for this kind of wood carving because the twisted anomalous growth locks the grain together so they don't split the way straight-grained wood does. However, this is also a good example of a burl that is not ethical to collect. If this tree were to be chewed down by beavers, yes, absolutely, I would cut that out. But this is a good, strong tree. It has a long life ahead of it. It's a valuable timber species. It's a valuable wildlife species.
Black cherry is a really, really good food plant for a lot of wildlife. It's not suppressed and it has a long life ahead of it. So this is not one that I would never in a million years cut down that whole tree. And there's no way to get up to that burl without cutting down the whole tree. So we're just going to wave high and keep on walking.
Let's look at the wood that we collected as well as a couple other pieces. But before we do and start chopping into these, just like to mention that this is an unmonetized, unsponsored YouTube channel, so we really need your help to fund all of these things. The travel, the materials, the tools, is all comes out of our own pocket. And we are most grateful for everybody over on Patreon, and there's a lot of rewards if you join. So just wanted to say that thank you and invite everybody who's new to check out the Patreon if you are so inclined. Also, before I start chopping into these things, I want to talk a little bit about wood selection. So what we found today was cherry, which is a good option. There is some toxicity to living cherry wood cells, but the xylem that we're going to be making our spoon out of isn't living, right? So like most of the fruit woods, there is a cyanide content to the cambium layer, but that's all chopped away. So I'm not worried about making a spoon out of cherry. Maple and birch are also good options for this. Sycamore is a good option for this. Really, any hardwood that is not ring porous. Okay, so what you don't want to use is anything coniferous, anything with a flammable resin in it. And if you go into the tropics, there's other woods that are non-conifers that also have flammable resins in them, right? So don't use any of those. When we go to do the burnout, those will just flare up and you won't have control over your little coal burning area. You won't be able to direct it. It's just going to be a big poof of flame and there goes your spoon. You also don't want to use a soft hardwood. So don't use basswood, don't use tulip poplar. They're just too, don't use aspen or cottonwood, right? They're too soft. Willow is too soft. And there's nothing wrong on the face of it with using those, but if you're actually going to put this spoon to work or or bowl or whatever you're making, if you're actually going to put it to work and use it and eat it and put it in a backpack and schlep it around the woods, and you have used those softer woods, it's just not going to be the durable item that you want it to be, okay? And obviously don't use a wood that has any real toxicity issues in the wood itself, okay? So I would recommend against walnut because quite a few people are allergic to the wood. Somebody with a tree nut allergy, you don't want to give a bowl of soup in a walnut spoon, right? So avoid those, and there's a number of shrubs around here that have some toxicity issues with the wood. Don't use anything in the bean and pea family. Don't use elderberry, right? That has a toxic wood, right? So do your research and rule out all of those toxic woods. And then lastly, don't use anything that's ring porous because it's just too porous. It's going to absorb too much food and then it's going to spoil in the pores of the wood, right? So don't use ash, it's too porous. Oak is too porous, right? So avoid those for a cooking implement. But, look in your area, look for a non-toxic, high-density, low-porosity wood, and you'll have a nice product. So this is the one that we found and cut. And I had the thought of maybe making 2 sets of blanks out of it, maybe trying for 4. But I don't think I'm going to. Because this curve is not all that extreme. And I really like this curvature for a handle. So I think I'm going to take this for the handle and then this for the bowl. Cut it off here and cut it off there. And just try to get 1 or 2 nice blanks out of this section. So after we collected this piece of wood, we were kind of walked out the scenic route and I found this piece just laying on the ground. Now this is also a piece of cherry, and the core of it here is really nice and intact, okay? The outside is very, very pithy and rotten. So this is typical of cherry wood. The sapwood is very rot prone. The heartwood is high tannin and very rot resistant. So we may or may not get a blank out of this, but I'm absolutely going to give it a chance, and I'm going to chop into it, okay, and just see what we can find. I see one big check right here, but if it's not too pithy on the outsides, I can probably split it in width this way and get two nice small dippers, or leave it full width if that doesn't go too deep, which I don't think it does, and get one really nice big dipper. Okay, so we're going to play with that. Now let's talk about a couple other things. One, well, when you have a project in mind and you're looking for just that stick, it can be really hard to find just that stick. So it's a lot nicer to have a pile of sticks that are ready to go for when you want a project, that are already good, collected and dry. However, you need to know a couple of things in order to dry them successfully. So this I collected last fall. I was helping a friend prune some apple trees, and this looked like a really nice branch after we pruned it out. It's like there's a project in there. There could be a spoon in there. It has enough curvature. It could be a small boomerang, although I probably won't use it for that because it would be too narrow this way till I cut it all down. I don't know what I'm going to use it for, but I'm going to use it for something because it's a cool piece. And apple wood is beautiful, beautiful wood. So what I did was, first I leave the bark on. That will slow down drying and inhibit checking. And then the ends are painted. Okay, both ends are painted. Right? And I don't care what paint you use, but the gloppier the better. So this was, I was pruning, so I had some pruning coat handy. So this is black pruning coat. Black pruning coat is basically the same as roofing tar, right? So if you have a bucket of roofing tar, that's really great for this. You can just put spray paint on it. I have done this where I didn't have anything handy and took a thumbful of Vaseline in it and smeared that on the ends. I've also done this where when I'm grafting trees, I use the wax ring from toilet bowl installation, right? Obviously not a used one, but it's like $2, $2 or $3, so you get a new one. I've taken a little bit of that, my grafting wax, and smeared it over the edge. Okay? So there's a lot of options, a lot of different things you can do to take care of this. This end did not check at all. This end checked, but it's shallow and it only goes, probably won't pick up on camera well, but it goes down to my finger. Okay, so just a little short 1.5 inch long check there in the end. So coat your ends if you're going to save wood long term. Now, in addition to sticks, another source of wood is firewood. Okay? So when you look at a lot of trees, and I've got two here that we're going to look at. We'll look at this one first. Where a branch stub has fallen off, okay? When that wood heals over, the grain will often twist, especially in cherry, and it takes on a burl-like characteristic even though it's not a true bacteria burl. Okay? These are really great for making things. Now, what you have to watch if you want to use it for a spoon or a bowl is you have to look at the end. And beloved, can you zoom in right on that? So if you look at the end here, you can see where the bark was healing over. This end got stuck around a little bit of a rotten stub, and it never sealed shut. Okay? So this cannot be a spoon or a bowl because it's got a natural drain built into it. And that's not ideal. However, when I'm looking at it, I see swirls in the grain down here and around it. So I will keep this and use it for a knife handle or something like that. It's still nice burl pattern wood, but it's not going to be a spoon or a bowl. So we'll set him aside. He'll stay on my stack of stuff, but not for this project. This one, on the other hand, sealed over completely. So I took my knife and scratched around the middle of it, okay? And whatever the history of this, and it definitely is a branch because I can see the interlocking growth here from where the branch stub comes in like this. You can see where the bark wood is undulating over that knot. Okay, this definitely was a branch. However, it's a branch that completely healed over, and it doesn't have a pre-installed drain. So this very much can be a spoon or a bowl or a kuksa or something like that. Okay, this is a nice shape. This is a beautiful shape for making like a kuksa or a canoe cup type item. So that's probably what this one will be. I don't think I will work on this one today. That'll be another day. But if I pick this one back up, when you do find them such that they're completely sealed over in the back, if you look at this end, most of these large branch stubs already have a hollow existing inside of them. So as you're going around, as you're walking around your property, or, if you don't have property to walk around, ask a farmer if you can go and collect down trees or cut a couple of branches for a craft project. They're probably not going to care. Give them a pie, right? Trade some tree branches for a piece of pie and go walking around the field rows and looking for stuff. But when you see down trees, look for these swellings, and these are a great piece to collect. Again, we don't want to cut down a tree for this that wasn't going to be cut down otherwise. And if you cut this lump off right here, you can see how the tree has completely compartmentalized that branch, and the rot did not penetrate the rest of the tree. But if you come with a chainsaw and cut that lump off right there, it breaks that barrier and exposes the entire tree trunk to rot. Okay, so don't do that. That's bad. But that being said, if you find this in your firewood pile, pull it out. And if you're walking around your field rows and you find a downed tree that has some of these on it, cut them off and take them home. Great wood for projects. Okay? So that's that. Now, I do want to look at a true burl. So this is also a piece of firewood, and you can see this knobby, gnarly growth. This is burl caused by bacteria infection, either agrobacter or sometimes, I'm not 100% sure, but I think black knot fungus on cherry can cause these sometimes. Black cherry is partially resistant to black knot fungus, but it gets these burls far more often than a lot of other fruit woods. So I have a hunch that the black knot fungus is opening up some, causing some benign openings in the bark, and either it's leading to burl growth healing up those openings, or agrobacter is getting into those openings. I'm not 100% sure which, but I do see, anecdotally, I see a correlation there. So this is a true burl. Now again, you can see how deep it goes here. Right, so this has been a burl for a while. You see that beautiful undulating texture in the wood. Can you zoom in on this? Okay, you can see that? Okay. And this is what's nice about these, because, if you cut this, it's great for knife handle type stuff, but because of that interlocking grain, it's also great for hollow work, because it won't split, it won't check, the same way other things will. And since this is firewood, it's already dead dry, so we don't have to worry about a drying process. You do need to watch, this has a couple of powder post beetle holes in it. I'm not sure if they're new or old, so I will probably work this and either work it down to knife handle blanks or make a bowl out of it fairly soon. Okay? But barring insect damage, it'll last a long time just in this condition. So, that's that little primer on these. I am going to cut down the two pieces that we're going to work on, the two cherry pieces we collected today, and we'll talk about processing and splitting. So here's the two blanks that we're going to work with today, and we're going to look at both of these and process these into useful preforms that will then take and burn. So I'm going to set this one aside for the moment, and this is that big chunk that I cut down to size, because this is obviously wants to be the bowl portion and this the handle.
Can you zoom? So on this, when I cut it, and I just cut this up quick on a power saw, and you can see a little bit of burn there. You could obviously do this with a more primitive handsaw, but I'm trying to get a video done today, so I cheated. You can see where this punk wood is, all the way around the outside, the rotten stuff. This was the sapwood, and the inner core, the heartwood, is completely solid, completely intact. This is very typical of cherry. This is also very typical of walnut. So if you find walnut laying in the forest, even if you have all this white pith on the outside, still collect it. You'll find some beautiful heartwood pieces in there that you can make stuff out of. Obviously, we already talked about wood allergies with walnut, so different project, of course, but nonetheless. Now, you can also see I'm not going to split this down the middle because the pith, the center of the log, is right here where my pinky finger's sitting. And this crack I was worried about only goes down into the pith. So once I remove the surface and flatten that, I won't have to worry about that crack. And the useful solid wood is only about that big. Okay? So I'm going to chop this pith off. This should be a pretty quick project. Now, you'll hear people use the word pith two different ways. And it does, in one sense, it does just reference soft wood. But there's kind of a technical and a non-technical sense. What I'm chopping off here is best described as punk wood or punky wood. You'll still hear people call it pithy. In the technical sense, pith means the middle of the log, because all angiosperms that have developed a woody trunk have that middle, and it's the center of the tree and its first year of growth. That section of wood, its first year of growth, that first shoot, always has a spongy pith in the middle as part of its natural growth form. So all logs have a pith regardless of whether or not they have turned punky. But because it's used in both senses, I've had people get confused as to what I was talking about. So when I'm saying always remove the pith from a spoon blank, I'm talking about that first year of growth pith. Not any wood that's punky. Although obviously we want to remove any wood that's punky too. So I'm going to keep going on this. I'm not going to film all of this chopping. Notice I'm always keeping my hand behind the log. Is this zoomed out so you can see? Mm-hmm. Notice I'm always keeping my hand behind the log so that, as I'm chopping here, if I, miss, my hand's protected. Okay? Never, ever, ever do this. Because then chop, 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 miss, that's a big deal. Right? So never put your hand on top, and try, you don't want to have your fingers around this way. Chop, 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 miss, lose a finger. Okay? So always keep your hand back when doing this. Basic hatchet safety. You can turn it off for a minute. By the way, making this hatchet was a project earlier on the channel. If you're new to it, I'll make sure that there's a link to that in the end screen. But you can see we've gotten all of that punk wood off. This branch stub down in there was very intact and fairly large. Okay, there's another branch stub here and another branch stub there. That's actually good for the integrity of this.
Because again, remember the conversation about burls. Why do they help resist splitting? And the answer is interlock swirling grain. Well, where the wood goes around all of these branch stubs, you also get interlock swirling grain. So having those on there is a good thing. So we've just been chopping at this. You can see I narrowed the handle here a little bit. It's very spoon-like looking in general already. I will probably shorten it a little bit more. Okay. But I'm just going for the roughest of rough chopping to give you the idea how to process this. Now, if I take this and use it as a pointer, right there, I'm pointing to that pith in the middle of the stem. Okay? Not punkwood, but pith. So everything from there to the top has to go bye-bye. So that's the next thing I'm going to do, is chop away all of that material, and then here on the handle, it's right there. Okay? Right there, where I'm pointing. Mm-hmm. Right? So everything from there to the surface has to go, because it will crack just like that. When you're chopping like this, you don't want to set it in here and just make a split all the way down. You want to make a series of chops all the way down. Take off the end. You can see now right there, that little dark spot, that's the pith coming to the surface. Mm-hmm. So here I'm below it, there I'm not to it yet. Now once you do that, it prevents the split from going real erratic and diving in. And even though the surface of this that was right next to that punkwood is sopping wet, this has been in the forest for a while and it's very, very dry and very resistant. That line, that's the pith. Okay, there's a little bit, there's a little bit. Okay, so here and here we're below it, I still have to take out that bit. Okay, that's just a knot, here's the pith. So in that section we're good to go. Okay, so you've got to find where your good wood is. You've got to get under the pith. Now you can see that's getting a little bit narrow. I don't want to get narrower than that. So I'm going to be real careful how I work and taper on the rest of this handle. It's going to be a little bit off to the side, I suspect. A little bit like that. Mm-hmm. My hand is because it's got too narrow there to be comfortable. Okay. So we keep chopping. Now, you can do all of this with the hatchet. I'm probably not going to, because my favorite tool for this is the draw knife. And since this is of a shape that I can lock in a vise and pull wood off with the draw knife, it's a little bit more controllable, a little bit faster, and a little bit safer, right? Like here in the middle, where this meets that, yes, I can chop from this direction for a while and then flip it over and chop from that direction. When I'm chopping from this direction, yes, I can do it. Do you see how close I am to my hands? Right, so that's not the most comfortable thing. Now you can stack up a couple of logs, so this is leaning against a log, and then that will take the impact. But it's a lot more comfortable and convenient to just do it with a draw knife. Okay, so I wanted to show you some of this with the hatchet. I'm going to set that aside, and I am going to finish the rest of that with a draw knife. Now, let me put that a little further out of the way. That looks getting too rotten even to hold a hatchet. Now we want to look at this one. So that's just the early stage reduction on the first plank. Let's look at this guy. This guy we're going to split. Okay? So looking at this, these knobs, not, right? In this instance, those are good. Again, just like with the other one I said, right, having those knots right there gives you curly interlock grain, so it's less likely to split. Okay? So what I think I'm going to do with this is just, the pith right here in the middle is fairly symmetrical. Okay? Here's a little pointer. The pith is right there. So I have to get that much out. These knots will only go from the middle out. Okay, so they won't cross the pith. So what I think I'm going to do is do this one with a wedge. Set that in right on the pith. Across where I want the top of the spoon to be, and just go for it. Go for the split. Because I know it won't run into these knots. It can't. And I know I'm going to have to take down to the pith anyway. So maybe I'll get one blank, maybe I'll get two blank, but I'm happy if I only get one. That's fine. And that split very nicely. And it pretty much took the pith all the way. There's a tiny bit of pith there in the handle. So let me just chop that out quick. Okay. So yeah, that'll be a nice spoon blank. I'm going to take quite a bit off the tip here. It's kind of outrageously long. I can always cut it shorter. I can't cut it longer. Okay. So again, I'm going to bring the edges in. I'm going to make sure you see that dark groove right there.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the pith sits. So that has to come out. It has to come out that and about a 1/4 inch below it. Okay? And I think the pith completely disappeared from the handle section. So I'm going to finish shaping these two blanks off camera. I think you get the idea of where we're headed with it. And then we'll meet again with a fire and start the burnout. These are the 3 blanks that we made out of those 2 logs. The one that had all of that pithy wood on the outside, this is the blank that it gave me. And it's a really nice classic ladle spoon, right? Ladle scoop. I do wish that there had been a little bit more width. The depth is awesome. I wish there was a little bit more width, but you know, that's okay. I leave these a little bit long, and I'm not going to burn all the way out to the tip. I'm probably going to burn out this much of it, right? Leaving it a little bit long gives you a little bit more insurance against cracking when you're burning it out, especially when there's still some moisture in the wood, okay? So that's the, ooh, almost dropped it. That's the single blank that I got out of that big piece. And this was cut so far down here to remove the pith in the middle, okay? It's narrow to remove the punky wood, and then it's, you know, cut way down in here to remove the pith in the middle, right? It dove. It was shallow here, and then it dove down and then came back up, right? But the wood's going to tell you what to do. When you're doing this, you don't have full control over the spoon that you make because the wood gets a voice in the process as well, right? But that's, I think, a beautiful thing about this process. Giving your material a voice in the finished product is, in my opinion, a plus, not a minus. So that gave us a really nice blank. And then the other piece that we split with the wedge gave us these 2 blanks. Okay, this was the initial piece right there. This one is a little bit shallower, okay? And then this one is a little bit steeper, a little bit deeper, because the knots are actually giving us a little bit extra material to work with, right? The 3 big knots that were in there. I'm leaving the bark on at this stage because it will slow down drying of the exterior, and that again helps prevent checking. There still will be some checking when you're doing this kind of hot work with green wood. There's going to be some checking. We just want to have it controllable and manageable so that when we get to our final product, we have something that we can work with. And here's an example of where we want to get today. So this I did last weekend at a demonstration. Again, it's a nice classic ladle shape. And we burned out the bowl. We burned out an oval bowl. And I'll talk to you about controlling the direction that it burns. We do have some checking. There's a little bit of checking here in the bottom. I did fill this up with water, and this one does leak a tiny bit. But, you know, for a scoop, that's okay. You don't want to have all your soup end up on the counter, but if the bottom of the spoon gets a little bit wet, not the end of the world. Okay? And that may close up as it completes drying. Sometimes a check will open up a little bit in early stages of drying and then close completely as it dries. So we'll just see how that matures and develops. But this is an example with this process. And this branch was collected again from a tree that a beaver chewed down. So it was already down and on the ground when I picked it up. Now I'm not going to do all of these today. I think I'm going to choose to work with this one first because I think it's an interesting shape. So what we want to do, if you have a knife that you can scoop out a hole, you can just go ahead and like create an initial divot here. And that will help you hold the coal. But it's not absolutely necessary, and I want to talk to you about doing this with 0 tools. So we just need to get a coal from our fire. Put the coal on the spoon. Okay. And now once we have our coal on the spoon, we're just going to blow on it. These coals were a little bit dark when I put them on. It's going to look a little bit dark because we're in bright sunshine, so the camera's not going to pick up the heat as well as if we were in a dark room. But hopefully you can see that as I'm blowing, these coals are relivening, and I'm starting to see char in the bottom of the wood. The key to doing this efficiently is blowing on it constantly. You don't just put your coals here, set it down, and walk away. The coals are just going to go out. You have to blow on it, and you have to blow on it continually. But you do have to make sure that you don't blow so hard that you blow the coals off and onto your lap. So I'm going to sit, I'm going to blow on these coals for a little bit, and then once we've started to make some progress, we'll do a couple updates as we go along burning out this spoon. We've used about 3 or 4 coals here. You keep blowing on them until, you know, they turn into little nuggets like this and they just blow out, right? That's not exactly helpful, having your coal blow out around. So when they're getting to the point where they're blowing around too much, you can just put them back in the fire and get another coal. Now, as you go and you start to turn the surface of this into charcoal, that's going to crack and pull away. And you have a texture to it where you have large areas of a solid little piece of charcoal there and then a crack in between those. Well, the bottom of that crack is still exposed to the full heat, but the top is insulated. So if you don't scrape that away, you'll eventually kind of burn those cracks deeper and deeper, and that texture will transfer to the bottom of the spoon, which you don't want. So every so often you need to come and scrape that away. If you have a hook knife, it's a great thing to use for that. However, you don't need it. So I'm just doing this with a little pebble. This is just a little piece of shale. It's not nap flint. It's not an official scraper in any way. It's just a little piece of shale. But you can see when I just scrape the sides, all of that char just pops right out. Okay? So we just scrape this down, scrape away that charred surface. And this is a great project for somebody who wants to carve a spoon. And most people have at least a pocket knife that to use for whittling. Pruning saws are easy enough to get for cutting your stalk out. But hollowing tools are rather more specialized and difficult to sharpen. So you need the tool, and then you need a way to sharpen it, right? And it's a much larger toolkit. So if you want to try a little bit of hollow work carving, you can just do this, because now instead of needing a knife to do the hollowing, I just have this little chip of rock. Okay? So we've scraped that. We're going to do more burning, so it doesn't need to be perfect. I'm going to go get a coal. That looks like a nice one. Yeah. And now, there's going to be the tendency to burn down faster than you burn to the sides. So, if you look at how I have this placed, I have that coal placed back from the existing hollow, because I want to draw this out more toward the handle. So I'll put it there in that direction and then blow on it from the opposite side. Okay, get it livened back up, and now we're going to work in that direction. So by adjusting where we place the coal and the direction from which we blow on the coal, we can control how this burns, okay? With actually quite a bit of control, right? The texture in the bottom you don't have full control over, and it will spread a little bit and sometimes go a little deeper than you might want it. But I mean, you could pay attention to those things as well. But you do have quite a bit of control in how this burns. And do pay attention as you get closer to a finished piece. When you start to get a thin section, the walls will start to heat up. So when I was burning out this and I had my fingers right where they currently are, I could feel that wall starting to get hot, okay? Which is indicating that you're getting a thin wall in that area, and it's time to really pay attention to that. Move the coal away, scrape the coal dust out of the bottom, and see where you actually are. So we're going to do some more burn. We're going to make this from a kind of a round hole to more of an oval hole, and then we'll look back at it. This is where we're going to quit for now with this spoon. So I've still got to do the last little scrape out. Let me find a pebble here. And you can see the finished contour. Now I had a little bit of a problem with this one. That's the side here started to burn out. And once that starts, it's really hard to get that to stop, because those thin edges get super heated and super dry, and just even though the coal's here, just the convective heat will slowly keep eroding those walls. And that's why I'm going to quit here. I would like to take a little bit more out of the bottom, but if I do, I'm going to lose my whole side. Okay. Now, a little bit of burnout here is not the end of the world. That's why we leave stuff thick at this stage. You see how thick this handle is? Your eye is going to index the spoon by the position of the handle. So what I will do is I will cut. I'm going to exaggerate this with my finger. I will cut that corner off at an angle. Not this exaggerated an angle, but at an angle. And then you will naturally hold the spoon that way, and it will kind of adjust for a little bit of that burnout. Okay? So we can recover these small issues later on in the game, right? So that's not a disaster. However, it does mean that it's time to stop. Why did that happen? Well, I needed to walk away for a minute, and I left the coal sitting on there, and it was hanging over a little too far. So that was a failure of multitasking, and it's totally on me. But we still have a nice spoon. And I think it's really, it's fun. And it's really nice to have some tools in your toolbox, your mental toolbox like this, that say you don't need to spend as much money on physical tools in your physical toolbox. As long as you have a fire, you can do hollow work. Okay? Now, you're not going to, do detail carving with a coal like this, but you can do basic hollow work. So that's one less tool you have to worry about, especially if you're going to be doing like bushcraft camping and want to make things while you're out camping. If you know you can do this, that's one less tool that you need to lug around in your backpack, right? And it's just kind of fun, to do things while you're sitting around the fire. So it's also yet another thing that you can do while sitting around the fire telling stories with your friends, family, and loved ones. So I think it's a nice project. These are the two I've done recently. This one was a week ago. I like how this one came out a little better than this one. The difference, the reason this is more even is because it's less oblong, right? It's just harder to get an even burn across a long surface like this than it is to just bore a hole straight down in, okay? So that's two different examples of two different shapes. But when you find your piece of wood is going to dictate the design of the spoon, right? You're working with nature. You're not imposing your will completely upon nature when you're doing things like this. And they're both perfectly serviceable little serving ladle. Now, the last thing that we need to do is to set these aside to dry. So these were both beaver killed trees, so it was dead wood, but it's still got a lot of moisture in it. It wasn't cured. Because of that, it is a checking hazard. So we need to let it dry. We can't just wrap it in a plastic bag and prevent it from ever drying ever. But we need it to dry slowly. And a good way to keep these things from drying too quickly is to wrap them in paper. The paper is porous enough that it will allow them to dry, but at the same time, it will keep air from hitting them directly, so they can just sit and dry slowly. Now, in addition to this, I'm going to put them in a corner. I'm going to you can put these in a cupboard. You can put these in a cool corner of the room. You don't want to, put these by the fireplace where it's going, or a heat register where it's going to, super dry them really, really quickly. You don't want to put them in an attic for the same reason, and you don't want them out where the wind's going to blow on them, and just, again, dry them really quickly and force them to crack. So by drying them slowly, we have a better chance of minimizing checking. Now, there will be some checking. And again, that's why we leave things a little thick at this stage so that we can have a better chance of recovering from that checking. There's a balance here. The thicker it is, the more likely it is to check, but the easier it is to recover from checking. The thinner you make it, the less likely it is to check, but if it does check, that's all she wrote, right? You're done. It is what it is. You can't recover from it. So that's kind of a balance. And when we are working with green wood, you are going to have some loss to checking and cracking. It's just part of the game. You're just accepting that when you go into the project. The other option is to plan a year or two ahead on all of your projects. Keep your eye open so that when you find wood, you're thinking, oh, That's a beaver chew. Oh, there's a spoon. There's a boomerang. There's a candlestick, right? Whatever you want to make. See those things, cut them off, take them home, paint the ends, and let them dry, and then process them after they're fully cured a couple of years later. And, you know, to the modern ear, that's like, oh, no, I don't want to wait a couple of years to do my projects. But think about a world where you start doing this at a young age, right? At 8 or 10 years old, you're starting setting wood aside for projects. So by the time you're 25, you've got, 10 years or more of accumulated stuff that's dry cured and ready to go, right? And, if you start now, 3 years from now, you'll have that stash starting to build, right? So always keep thinking, like, as you're going through life, as you're looking at your wood pile, as you're walking through the forest, right? Is there a project in this? And pick those things out. The better able you are to do that, the more your pantry of project materials will be robust. You'll be able to just go and get fully dried material anytime you want it, and it makes those things that much easier. But also you'll start seeing the abundance all around you. The forest is abundant. We take care of the forest for its own, you take care of the forest because the forest has its own value, but having taken care of the forest will then take care of us. And doing things like this will help you to see that abundance as it exists all around you, and that's a tremendous blessing. So if you've enjoyed this, I hope that you'll join us again here. If you would like to support the channel, we are most grateful for all of our patrons. There's a link to the Patreon in the description box below. And either way, I hope that you'll join us here next time at Old Ways Rising Farm.